Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, November 6th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. It is episode 420 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. Appreciate you all tuning in here on YouTube and, of course, all of the different audio podcast platforms. For those of you tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. It is Wednesday. It is another day closer to the New York Jets Week 10 matchup in Arizona against the Cardinals. And we've got a couple different topics to talk about today. Some injury updates that were reported from Jeff Ulbrich in his press conference earlier today. And Joe Douglas spoke this afternoon for the first time since his preseason press conference that he did before the 2024 campaign started. And I must say, he sounds like a broken man that knows he is only going to be here for really the next 2 months. And then he's going to be shown the door, and that's going to be it for him as the general manager here for the New York Jets. But we will break down some clips, break down some of his comments, give you my biggest takeaways and all that good stuff here on a Wednesday edition of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. As always, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you click my link in the description of this video, you can get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 while using BetUS. You want to get on any college football, NFL, NBA, NHL, college basketball action, any action you want to get in on from a gambling perspective, check out BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook, and use my link, 125% sign-up bonus, first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, you want a ticket for a sporting event, you want to head out to Jet game this year, you want to head out to a play, a concert, a show, whatever, you name it, any NBA game, NHL, anything, you name it. And if you haven't used SeatGeek before, use my promo code BubsOnSports for $20 off your first purchase. So make sure to check out SeatGeek. And also our friends over at Huga House. You see me rocking my Aaron Rodgers 20th season hat right now. If you want any of Huga House's awesome hats or some of their new arrivals that just released last week, make sure to go check them out. And at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some Huga House swag. So today here on episode 420, we're going to be breaking down some injury updates, some comments made by Joe Douglas, and all that good stuff here as we are another day closer to the New York Jets Week 10 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. What really was that second half of Thursday night? Was that a spark? Was that just a kind of typical Jets win where everybody counts them out and they give you some hope just to have it crushed a week later? Well, we'll find out here in a little over, 4 days from now, however many days it is from now here on a Wednesday. But before we, kind of get into it here, Jeff Ulbrich spoke earlier today about some injury updates. Lots of stuff going on up front on the offensive line. Here was Ulbrich on the latest injury news with the New York Jets here heading into Week 10.
Morgan Moses with the knee, Tyron, they'll both be out for today. As much as body maintenance and vet stuff as it is a little bit of an injury there. Hansen won't practice today. John Simpson, ABT. CJ still dealing with the neck. Solly with the knee won't practice. MC2 with his back. From a limited perspective, Chaz and Ashton will come back, and Aaron Rodgers and Tony Adams will be for full participants. So from that standpoint, fired up to get those guys back in the mix, especially for a Wednesday practice, which obviously they've missed the last couple weeks.
So we kind of knew this coming in. Of course, we had to wait to see coming off the Thursday night game where the Jets get a little bit of a mini bye here before heading into this matchup against the Cardinals. But they are still very banged up front. As Ulbrich said there on the offensive line, Morgan Moses, Tyron Smith, Jake Hansen, John Simpson, and AVT all won't practice today, and they all didn't practice today. In fact, AVT, John Simpson, and Jake Hansen all were on the stationary bikes this afternoon. Solomon Thomas, who we also mentioned, Key cog to that defensive line. Big week for that defensive line as they look to stop James Conner and a very, very good Arizona Cardinals rushing offense. He missed practice today, and he was also on the stationary bike. So as it looks right now, the Jets offensive line is really, really banged up, which is kind of typical because it's November. It always feels like this time of year for all NFL teams across the league. Guys tend to be banged up. Now, there is some positives to this injury report. Ulbrich did go on to say a little later in his press conference that he believes both tackles will play. He expects Moses to play, expects Tyron Smith to play. And if you heard Moses speak the other day, he's dealing with just about every single injury you could imagine. So maybe he takes after Rodgers and Morstead and gets some cayenne pepper and water into his system and starts to heal up quicker. But Moses is really banged up. Should play, probably will play, but will be far from 100% from what he was saying the other day. Tyron Smith probably also will play. So both tackles should play. He also talked about John Simpson. It looks like they are a little bit more optimistic on him playing this week than they were a couple days ago or even just going into today's practice. They thought he might be a little bit more banged up than expected, but still something to keep an eye on. So it does seem like Simpson, Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses will play. Not a ton of optimism around Elijah Vera Tucker with that high ankle sprain. When asked about him directly, said, we'll see. So feels like AVT probably won't return this week, which would leave it ultimately up to potentially Olu starting again at right guard, or, of course, Jake Hansen, depending on what happens with him. But something to keep an eye on there with how those guards play out. And if Simpson's out, then you can pretty much guarantee Olu playing, especially if AVT's out. We'll see what happens with Hansen, how his health develops the rest of the week, how Simpson develops the rest of the week, although there seems to be a little bit of optimism there that he could play. Seems like he's healthier than maybe what they expected. So a lot of moving parts right now up front on the offensive line, but we'll see how it all ends up playing out. But certainly a possibility we see Olu again there at right guard where we saw him last week, where considering he's never played right guard in his life, to step in an NFL game, I thought he did a pretty good job. This is a guy that's played right tackle, right guard, and he was drafted to be a left tackle. So that's kind of the Jets' way, it seems like right now. Play guys at every other position except their primary position. But here we are, I guess, whatever it takes to try and fill those holes up front. So those are the injury updates here for the New York Jets. Now, on to the real meat and potatoes of today's episode, and that's Joe Douglas. So Joe Douglas spoke today, and before I even play you any clips, because we do have a lot of sound to play you, and before I even get into, all that stuff, just listening to Douglas today, watching the press conference, he sounds like a broken man. He sounds like a guy that is completely dejected, realizes this team is 3-6, realizes this team really is not going to go anywhere. At most, this team, if we're all being honest here, probably gets back to 7 wins just to collapse at the end of the year to get to 7-10. So they're not bad enough to be in play for a quarterback, but they're not good enough to make the playoffs. So they're right in that mediocre lane, which is the worst place to be in sports, is mediocre right in the middle. So that's kind of what he sounded like. He sounded like a guy today that realizes on November 6th, his power is completely gone. Woody's running everything right now. He realizes he's basically a lame duck, a puppet, whatever you want to say the front office is right now, because there's not a single soul in the front office that is actually doing any work right now. It is all Woody Johnson. And he just sounded dejected. Like, you even just listen to his the tone, the way he was speaking, he just sounded dejected. He sounded down and out. He sounded like a broken man. He sounded like a broken general manager that realizes his contract's up at the end of the year. He has lost all control. It's 100% Woody Johnson right now. And that's it. So that was my biggest takeaway. Now, there was one quote that we don't have the audio of, but this is probably the biggest takeaway of them all. He said, quote, "I serve at the pleasure of the owner." And that was on the Saleh firing, Woody firing Saleh, basically without telling anybody, walking into Saleh's office that Tuesday morning after that Vikings game and saying, "Hey, you're fired," without addressing anybody in the front office, without addressing anybody, obviously, on the coaching staff. He basically said, "You know what? I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm firing this coach. I want to create a spark. Didn't even talk to Douglas about it. And he said about that, quote, I serve at the pleasure of the owner. And that right there just tells you, I have no power. This is all Woody Johnson. I know I'm gone after their week 18 matchup to close out the season against the Miami Dolphins. I know I'm gone after the first week of January, and I might as well start looking for other destinations. That's what I said. I said that the other last week. Just put Douglas out of his misery. We saw Saleh, right? They fired Saleh. Now he's in Green Bay picking up an offensive consultant role, as Mike LaFleur, or as Matt LaFleur rather called it, kind of a fluid role where he's in Green Bay for a couple days, then comes back here in Jersey and then back to Green Bay, helps out a little bit. But that's what I'm saying. Like, might as well just fire Douglas now and just help him out. Give him a head start. His contract's up. You know he's not coming back. Give him a 2-month head start on figuring out where he's going to be next year. So that was my biggest takeaway from today. It was a broken man that has no power and realizes he's done here in 2 months. Pack your bags. Might as well start prepping now. But here was more sound, more Douglas on, except from that just one quote, on the whole Robert Saleh firing, Woody Johnson basically doing it himself. Here was Douglas.
We haven't talked to you since, I think, right before the season started. You mentioned Robert. What was your feeling about that? Did you agree with that decision?
Yeah, I know. Woody spoke afterwards. I don't really have anything to add, any comment to add. All I can say is that since that decision's been made, all my energy, all my focus has been doing whatever I can to help Rick, his staff, in the locker room turn this thing around. So that's.
So again, kind of the average answer. As you know, I work at the pleasure of the owner. That was a quote that wasn't in that clip, but then goes on to say, I'm doing everything in my power day to day, get this team ready to roll. Ulbrich helping him out, all that stuff. But look, you can't say anything. He's not going to say anything. He never openly said anything about agreeing with the move. If he had any input on the move, we all know it was all Woody. And Douglas right now is just a sitting lame duck puppet, whatever you want to consider him. Anybody in that front office, there is not a single soul right now in the Jets front office working. I mean, even the whole Hassan Reddick, and I'm just rehashing stuff that we already know, but just bringing it up because of Douglas speaking today, and it all kind of ties together. And we all knew the whole Reddick situation, that was 100% Woody Johnson. He fired Robert Saleh. Then he goes on there and says, hey, Reddick, come up 95, all that stuff. He had that kind of dumb quote that's just kind of cringeworthy. He always has it. And then, a week later, it was thinking is overrated. Or maybe it was the same. I don't know. Either way, Woody's always got dumb stuff he always says. And then they go out and trade for Devontae, which was mainly Woody all in. Then they go and sign Reddick, which was none of that was Douglas. That was all Woody. So just, the New York Jets. Now here was Douglas on where the team stands at 3-6, and if he believes this team could potentially go on a run after Houston.
Just what are your thoughts just about how this season is broke down and just everything that's happened, that's taking place?
Obviously not where anyone envisioned us being right now at 3-6, coming out of training camp. But I do think after Thursday night game, the way we finished that game, the way we came out in the second half, I think Brick had a great message to the team on Monday, just saying, look, guys, none of this started the way we wanted to start it, but we still have everything in front of us. Every goal we want to accomplish is still out in front of us, and so it starts with a tough opponent in Arizona this weekend.
For all the Yankee and Jet fans out there, that end part there, everything's right in front of us, gives you very Aaron Boone vibes from the Jets GM here in Joe Douglas. Look, the Jets continue to hype up this week. They continue to hype up last week's second half. I've continued to say this team's got to get back to 500 for me to believe. This is a very tough matchup coming up here against Arizona. We could talk about speeches, could talk about practice all we want, could talk about all this nonsense. At the end of the day, they've got to go improve it. And one half of football is not enough for really many people in this fan base to move the needle to get these people to buy back into what is right now a 3-6 football team, which is simply not anywhere near good enough to do anything the rest of the season. Now, I want to get to some quotes on Douglas on the Mike Williams trade, but there was also some comments that Ulbrich made on that, so I'll tie those two together. So to finish out some of these Douglas clips here, Again, there's not a whole lot for me to say at this point with Douglas. We all know he's just a lame duck GM that's going to get fired here in 2 months and has absolutely no control right now. So here was Douglas on his job security, and as typically people would do, just kind of dodge the question, talking about he's just here focusing on what he is now. But either way, Joe Douglas on his job security and his future with the team.
Are you concerned about your future with the team, Joe?
No, I come in here every day. Just want to do whatever I can to help this team reach its goals, it gets to its destination, and whatever happens.
Have you talked to Woody about your future?
Woody and I talk every day. I'm not going to get into details about any of our conversations, but singular focus right now is the Cardinals and trying to improve on.
So there's Douglas on the job security. Now I want to play 2 more clips for you. One from Douglas, one from Jeff Ulbrich on the Mike Williams trade. We'll start with Douglas because it's a little bit of a longer clip here, just over a minute. Douglas on the Mike Williams trade and what's next now for this wide receiving core. And I want to talk a little bit more just about one player specifically in this whole situation that I think a lot of people would like to see more play time. But here's Douglas, then we'll go to Ulbrich on the Mike Williams trade.
Why didn't it work out for Mike Williams here? What led to the decision to trade him to Pittsburgh ultimately?
Yeah, look, Mike's a great teammate, and Mike obviously was battling, coming back from a severe ACL injury, and he did everything he could, and obviously not being part of OTAs, not being able to be part of a majority of training camp, just could never really get that synced up. But this is a great opportunity for him to have a fresh start, and also it's a move we wouldn't have made had we not felt good about the guys we have in the room. Us acquiring a player like Devontae gives us the flexibility to, if a team wants to be aggressive to acquire a player like Mike, we can do that, and we feel good about having 2 elite receivers, and Allen should come back 100% soon, and great opportunity for young guys like Zay and Corley, and so I think we're really happy with a lot of the depth we have in the room.
Jeff, why didn't it work with Mike Williams?
For a lot of different reasons, I think at the end of the day, like, we got to look at this as an opportunity now for Irv and Corley and Zay to get more involved with our offense. So for whatever the reason, for a little bit of us, a little bit of him, a little bit of everything. But it's a great opportunity for him too to go out there in Pittsburgh and get an opportunity maybe to get more targets, be more involved.
So there's Ulbrich and Douglas decided just to put the 2 clips together there on the whole Mike Williams situation, trading him, all that stuff. Douglas talking about how it didn't quite work out here. The whole injury, training camp, not a whole lot of chemistry. Look, we all know why Mike Williams is gone. Him and Rodgers were not on the same page. We know how that is with Rodgers, the whole red line incident, the whole slipping and falling in the Buffalo game, the 2 weeks in a row, Minnesota Buffalo. We all get it. We talked about it yesterday on the podcast, reacting to the breaking news that was released yesterday about Williams to Pittsburgh. But the big thing to me that I want to see more of, especially if the wheels really fall off here, like, if the Jets get back to 500 and, Lazard gets back and you want to play those type of guys and more go all in, fine. But if this team loses this week and then loses next week and you're 3-8, even if you just lose this week, you want to start to see more young guys. You want to start to see some of these other young players, see what you have in them at least for the future. And Malachi Corley specifically. Now, I know the whole incident on Thursday night, dropping the ball before the end zone or before the goal line, was not a great look, but you hear Ulbrich talk about Irv Charles getting more of an opportunity. They talk about Xavier Gipson, which, fine, Xavier Gipson, right? You're going to have to get him opportunities. You can't just force feed Corley, but there is no excuse now for the New York Jets to at least try and get Malachi Corley involved in the passing game. Like, there is absolutely no excuse, whether or not he's going to pan out, whether or not he's going to work out for this team moving forward, or if he's just going to fall on the long list of day 2 wide receivers that miss for the New York Jets. Whatever it is, you need to figure out something. You need to see something in him by the time this year ends, especially if the wheels completely fall off. You want to see him get more and more reps. I'm so tired of this organization, this front office, the coaching staff all the time hyping up these players on draft night or in free agency, all this stuff, and then them coming here and doing absolutely nothing or not getting any play time. I mean, how many times through the offseason, how many clips on draft night did we get from the Jets social media pages about Joe Douglas and working the phones, trying to get Corley, all this stuff, trading up, you can't talk about, oh, he was this high on our board and made all this stuff to trade up for him and show all these clips of them being so fired up and so nervous at the same time in the draft room, hoping that he falls, and then having him come here and barely playing him. I mean, outside of last week, the guy had 3-4 snaps total on all. I mean, the guy hasn't played. There's no excuse now. Like, play Corley. Lazard's still on IR. Give him an opportunity. I do not want to see Irv Charles out there getting the majority of these snaps. Let's see what we have in Malachi Corley. You can't label this guy as the Yak King and we love him and we trade up and, oh, this and that. And he was third on their board or whatever the heck it was, and then just not play the guy. Well, let's see something out of him. Give him a chance. And that just goes back to the whole thing with the whole Mike Williams thing. The New York Jets are always a team that always use 1 to 2 to maybe 3 players. And that's it. They're always like that on offense. Defense a little bit differently, but defense is just a totally different thing. Like, everybody on defense usually gets it. Like, offense, it's totally different, of course. But how many times in past years with the New York Jets where you talk about 1 to 2 guys on offense and that's it? And it's the same thing this year. Like, all we're talking about is, and even Conklin's not really much of a speaking point. He hasn't gotten involved, I think, nearly as much as many people thought. All we're talking about is Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, and Breece Hall. That's it. Like, that's it. Mike Williams, we were talking about him for all the wrong reasons. Like, you look at some of these other teams across the NFL, they use everybody. Everybody. I mean, look at the Chiefs. They use everybody. I know the Chiefs are in the league of their own. They find they're just totally different, but the Jets are always a team that, like, never uses their depth, never has very good depth. They're always, especially on offense, it's 1 to 2 guys, and that's it. It's just, like, let's see something out of Corley. You want to give Gibson, more reps. I'm fine. Look, Gibson's only in his second year. Let's see. I don't think Gibson's your future slot, your future number 3 receiver. Ideally, Corley shows you something positive enough going into the offseason, but give him a chance. I better not see them just force feeding Irv Charles and Xavier Gibson. Let's see Corley. No excuse now. Lazard's still on IR for another 2 games, assuming he comes off after the bye week. You traded away Mike Williams. Give the guy a chance. You can't talk about how high you were on him and then just not play him. Let's see what you got, especially at this point in the year. Future-wise, let's see if you've got anything in some of these other younger players, especially if the wheels really fall off here and you don't find a way to go on a little bit of a run here after Houston, which I don't expect happening. But I guess we can hope, right? So that's episode 420. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on the injuries right now and Joe Douglas speaking today. Your takeaways from his press conference. Tomorrow we will have a Cardinals beat reporter on to talk about Jets Cardinals. So looking forward to that. So look for that video tomorrow about around the same time as this video is going up today, probably 5:30 Eastern-ish time. So stay tuned for that. Friday or Saturday, we will have our game preview up Saturday morning, as we always do, for Sunday's Jets Cardinals matchup. So it's Cardinals week. Look to create a win streak. You win one, you win another one, boom, that's a win streak, 2 straight. Right? I know the Jets don't do that very often, but let's see if we can get on our second 2-game winning streak of the season. Come on, baby. Let's see if it happens. So, and of course, any other news that comes out around the team will be here talking about it all. So appreciate you all so much for the support. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.